Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivot Malkuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Shalom, everyone. This is Danny Palmer, the teacher and rabbi of a group here in Springfield, Missouri called Yachad Qahal. And we've been doing the video teachings, and we want to thank Yahweh for His blessing that we are able to do this. And because of my personal circumstances, this is currently my venue for teaching. And I hope that it's a blessing for you, because I enjoy getting to do it. I know it's my calling. Will it always be this format? I don't know. Even if the format changes, will this still be part of my ministry? That's all in Yah's hands. So we're trusting Him, and we know that a lot of things are happening right now, both in the on the planet itself, among the peoples and the nations. We also know there are a lot of alignments in the heavens, signs. And one of the cautions I would like to present to people is I've found that correlating to events such as the eclipses and the blood red moons and everything, I've been somewhat concerned about. There are some who put far more significance into them than maybe is needed, and others diminish them and put them at the too low level. I believe they are significant. I do believe they have an important thing they're telling us at this time. But I think we're still, as our brother Shaul said, we're still looking in the mirror dimly. And one of the things that I thought about here like a week ago was looking in the mirror dimly is I keep seeing my reflection. And as long as I keep seeing my reflection, I'm not seeing the reflection that's supposed to be being reflected, and that's Yeshua, who reflects his Father. That's the principle behind the sun and the moon. The sun is the primary giver of light for us in our visual field. The moon is like the mirror or the reflector. That's why, especially at the points of the full moon, it looks so bright. And unless you have severe visual problems like night blindness or something along that line, there are times when the moon is so bright and full that you go, wow, this isn't extremely different from the daytime. I can make out a lot of things. Probably the biggest thing that changes is some colors we don't see so well. We see the things, we see the grass, but we don't see the shade of green that we see in the daytime, or the leaves of the trees. Certain colors that does diminish our visual field. We still see them, but we don't see them exactly the same way we do in the daytime. A day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. This is a concept that is presented, that is spoken of in the Brit Hadashah. It's a very old concept. One of the places this appears is in one of the Qumran writings. Those of you who aren't aware, when I use the term Qumran, or anybody else uses the term Qumran, we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of the writings where that term appears is in the book of the Jubilees. And there are some other writings. There's, I believe there's one in the Tanakh somewhere, but I just cannot recall which book it's in. It may be the Psalms. It may have been something David wrote. But the teaching is going to be today based on the olive tree And what is it about? Who's in the olive tree and who's not? Have you been drafted into the olive tree, or were you drafted into some other tree and you thought you were in the olive tree? Or did you think that when you were grafted into the olive tree, it was your turn to take over the olive tree? I think that's what too many were taught. Well, we replace the Jews, or we replace Israel. The really funny part is many Christians are ethnically from the 10 tribes of Israel. So what they would basically be telling themselves is, Yahweh replaced us with us. Kind of funny in a way, isn't it? But the ewe, the sheep, the female sheep, is one of the little humor things that we use in some of our teachings as the title of some of them. Because the lost sheep of the house of Israel and those of Judah also, all the 12 tribes combined, were sheep of a flock. You know, most of the sheep in the flock are female. They're the ones that have all the lambs. You know, if you got a whole flock full of males, you know, as you slowly kill those males for eating or sacrifice, whatever, during the time periods, how is it going to rebuild? Yeshua was the firstborn of his mother Miriam. He was not the only son she had, or the only child she had. It tells us that she had other sons and some daughters. It never tells us what those daughters' names are. It doesn't mean the daughters aren't important. But we don't get their names. Yeshua gets his birthright from his mother. The ewe, the first one that breaks the womb. He gets all his legal rights from her marriage to Yosef, who is also of the house of Yehuda, also a descendant of David. And this is where the dispute is with Luke's account and Matthew's account of the family lines. The Matthew account does not make sense to be Yosef's, because if Yosef were the Matthew line, Yeshua would be disqualified, even though we know that Scripture tells us that Yosef is not his biological father. But everybody thought he was. It even tells us that in several places in the Brit, especially in Luke's account, where they thought he was the son of Yosef. All his legal rights would come from Yosef. Now, Miriam, the one Torah aspect that seems to make sense for her is there's a good chance that she may have been a daughter of a father who had no sons. And if so, then Miriam would have to marry another member of the tribe of Judah and have some of the same legal rights that she would have. But in the Matthew account, there is one name that disqualifies Yeshua from being the heir and laying claim to that legal right. It is Jeconiah. Because during the time of the early prophets, Jeconiah, who was the son of Yoshiyahu, was told that no descendant of his would ever sit on the throne again. That came from Yahweh. And if Joseph is where Yeshua gets his legal rights, which is how you would get them in Torah by your father, your legal rights, your tribal affiliation, your tribal heritage, the birthright comes from the mother. Firstborn status. But if Yosef was the Matthew line, Yosef would disqualify Yeshua. Because if the father was the descendant of Yechoniah, Yeshua couldn't be the heir of David and ever have the throne. So that's just something I wanted to place out there for you. And it's why I believe that Miriam's name is mentioned, because she's the 14th name. Because if she is the daughter of a father who had no sons, then she would have to be counted. And that's the only way you count a daughter. Now we're going to start out with Shemot, Exodus 35, verse 2. 6 days may work be done, but on the seventh day it shall become something holy to you, a Shabbat of complete rest to Yehovah. Anybody doing work on it shall be put to death. And those of you who have not seen any of my videos previously, I don't have a hang-up about which version of the name people use. And whatever translation I'm reading it from, I will use that version of the name. Yah is the only part I know that we have right. And the only way I would refuse to use a name is if the last part of it had a meaning that does not apply to Yah. And I've not been able to discover any of the names and versions that I've seen used out there that would give me a wrong impression or a wrong meaning. So in this particular translation, Yehovah will be the name that you will hear me speaking when I read it. It's not the one I personally favor, but I have no problem with it. And if you do, that's your issue. And we're going to move back to a previous reading, because I always like to tie the two together because the unity of the Torah. And if you don't know from one parsha to the next, there's a line tying them together. Shemot, Exodus 31, 12 to 18. And Yehovah said further to Moses, as for you, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, especially my Shabbats you are to keep, for it is a sign between me and you during your generations, that you may know that I, Yehovah, am sanctifying you. And you must keep the Shabbat, for it is something holy to you. A profaner of it will positively be put to death. In case there is anyone doing work on it, then that soul must be cut off from the midst of his people. 6 days may work be done, but on the seventh day is a Shabbat of complete rest. It is something holy to Yehovah. Anyone doing work on the Shabbat day will positively be put to death. And the sons of Israel must keep the Shabbat so as to carry out the Shabbat during their generations. It is a covenant to time indefinite. Between me and the sons of Israel it is a sign to time indefinite, because in 6 days Yehovah made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and proceeded to refresh himself. Now as soon as he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he proceeded to give Moshe 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written by Elohim's finger. The tablets are stone. He said we were supposed to take that information and write it on our heart. That's where the idea of sometimes we have to break one piece of Torah to keep another. And thankfully those instances are rare when we have to make that difficult choice. So don't beat yourself up or beat your brothers up when they do something where they violate one commandment in order to keep another. We wouldn't ask our policemen or our firemen or doctors and nurses not to go in and do their jobs on Shabbat. Hopefully they won't have to do so much, because the rest of us aren't doing things that we shouldn't do. Make their day a lot easier. But the kingdom of Yah is a government. None of the governments on this world are that kingdom. Anyone who thinks that the United States or any other country is the fulfillment of his kingdom is deluded. If this is what Yahweh promised, what a letdown. I'm an American citizen. I was born here, lived here all my life. I'm the only member of my family that's never left the borders of the United States. But I'm not one of those love it or leave it people. My country has its flaws. Just like each one of us have our flaws. Now we're going to go deal with Shabbat. Now those of you who aren't Jewish or aren't familiar with the use of the prayer book, the Siddur, used by Jews, and even some who are not Jews who have Messianic congregations, this section in Exodus 31 is included in one of the readings that you do on Shabbat called the Shamru, having to do with the Shabbat being a sign of the covenant. It's not Yahweh's responsibility to keep Shabbat, it's ours. He said those who do not keep Shabbat basically are saying, I'm not part of the covenant. He said it's a sign permanently, indefinite, perpetual, never-ending sign. Those who believe that the new or renewed covenant does away with Shabbat or any other instruction that Yah has given us does not understand what's going on. And you need to do more studying. You need to pray and ask God to open your heart and be willing to let him open your heart and your eyes and your mind. And he won't force us. He doesn't twist our arms. He doesn't hold a mountain over our heads and say, will you keep my covenant? If not, I'll dash you with this mountain. Shabbat, a sign of who Israel is. Anybody who doesn't keep Shabbat and claims to be in covenant, I'm afraid I would dispute that, and so does Yeshua, master of Shabbat. Now, in Shemot 39, verses 10 through 14, then they filled it with 4 rows of stones. A row of ruby, topaz, and emerald was the first row, and the second row was turquoise, sapphire, and jasper. And the third row was lashem stone, agate, and amethyst, and the fourth row was chrysolite and onyx and jade. They were set with settings of gold in their fittings, and the stones were according to the names of the sons of Israel. They were 12 according to their names, and the engravings of a seal, each according to its name, for the 12 tribes. Now this is the breastplate, containing stones, gems, and each one representing one of the tribes of Israel. Now, depending on what translation you read from, the translators chose what they thought was the stone represented by the Hebrew. So you will find a vast array of what each one of these stones is thought to be by different translators. So don't let it be a stumbling block that you go, oh, that's not what it says in the translation I'm used to reading. I don't think anybody's got it all right. So that should not be a point of contention. It's like so many other things that we don't quite understand yet. There are things that we understand quite strongly, and other things that we're still vague on, are we doing them right? Yahweh established a 7-day week pattern. The 7th day is a day of rest. The day of rest is a day for the husband to spend with his wife. That's what the commandments are. They're a marriage contract. And if we don't agree to it, what have we done? We have cut it. we have poured the cup of wine on it, saying, I reject it. These stones are very interesting because the priest, the Kohen Hagadol, when he went in to do his service, had to wear this breastplate every time, because this breastplate represents him being the mediator for all the rest of Israel. He's never supposed to forget. There were also 2 stones on each shoulder. Six brothers' names were written on each stone. And the priest was never to go into the sanctuary not wearing those 2 stones or the breastplate. And we get another taste of this in the Revelation, chapter 21, verses 9 through 27. And there came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, which were full of the 7 last plagues, and he spoke with me and said, Come here, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. So he carried me away in the power of the Spirit to a great and lofty mountain, and he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming out of the heaven from Elohim. And having the glory of Elohim, its radiance was like a most precious stone, as a jasper stone, shining crystal clear. And it had great and lofty wall, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names were inscribed, which are those of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. On the east were 3 gates, and on the north 3 gates, and on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. The wall of the city also had 12 foundation stones, and on them the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Now the one who was speaking with me was holding as a measure a golden reed, that he might measure the city, and its gates, and its walls. And the city lies 4 square, and its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs, its length and breadth, and height are equal. Also he measured its wall 144 cubits, according to a man's measure, at the same time an angel's. Now the structure of its wall was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the city's wall were adorned with every sort of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the 7th chrysolite, the 8th beryl, the 9th topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th hyacinth, and the 12th amethyst. Also the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each one of the gates was made of 1 pearl, and the broad way of the city was pure gold, as transparent as glass. And I did not see a temple in it, for Jehovah, the El, the Almighty, is its temple. Also the Lamb is. And the city has no need of the sun nor of the moon to shine upon it, for the glory of Elohim lighted it up, and its lamp was the Lamb. And the nations will walk by means of its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will not be closed at all by day or night, will not exist there. And they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. But anything not sacred and anything that carries on a disgusting thing and a lie will in no way enter into it. Only those written in the Lamb's scroll of life will. These stones here are very similar to the ones on the breastplate. Here in the Revelation, it also tells us that each gate has the name of one of the sons of Israel. The foundation stones are of the 12 apostles. And as we just looked at the Revelation and the similarities between the stones in the walls and everything, and the gates were made of pearl. Each gate was pearl. And it made me think of, okay, could this be a picture of Yeshua when he was referencing maybe in one of his parables about the person who finds a pearl and goes and sells everything they have to buy the pearl? Isn't the kingdom worth whatever it cost us? Because the kingdom's got way better than what we can have as it is now. we're still in the time that human beings are allowed to, unfortunately, wreak havoc on the face of the earth. It's consequences that those who aren't directly involved are having to bear the brunt of. There's a lot of people dying today. A lot of people dying because of other people's beliefs. And part of those is the West has its problem too. The West is doing some killing that it doesn't have the right to do either. The great Satan. Where's he at? He's all over the world right now. Because a Satan is anything opposed to Yahweh's will. There's a lot of people that are Satans. I do believe there is a being that manifests that nature. But if we always just go around thinking, well, he's the one that's the cause of all the problems, we let ourselves off the hook. And nowhere in Scripture does it say we have permission to do that. We are held to account. A judgment day will be coming for all of us. We will be judged on what we know, what we understand. Those who've never heard will be judged on less than we are. Don't kid yourself. It says so in Scripture. Our brother Shaul points that out. Who is the olive tree? The olive tree is Israel. Yisrael. That's what Shaul says. Are you Yisrael by birth, by joining? And obedient Israel is even more important than simply being Israel. Obedient Israel is who Yahweh is in covenant with. Everybody else just keeps having the opportunity to do the right thing. But eventually even Yah says that time will come to an end. So be careful how we treat one another. And be careful who you tell the good news to. Because maybe you put them in a bind by telling them something they're not ready for. You bring a curse on them. You bring judgment. Now let's go back and take a look at Shemot 40, verses 17 and 19. Accordingly, it came about in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was set up. When Moshe proceeded to set up the tabernacle, he went putting its socket pedestals down, and placing its panel frames, and putting its bars in, and setting up its pillars. Then he spread out the tent over the tabernacle, and placed the covering of the tent above it, just as Jehovah had commanded Moshe. The first year of the second month. Now let's use some Hebraic thought here. The second year. Okay, those of you who have been in the movement for any time whatsoever, the 7 days of the week are also used as a picture of a 7,000 year period. Okay? If the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was set up, okay, approximately the first 2,000 years of the 7,000 year cycle took place prior to the flood. Okay? So if essentially the first 2,000 years expire around the time that the flood waters recede and everything, and the second 1,000 years begin at that time or closely after that time, then when Yeshua, the physical man, appears on the scene as a descendant of David, as the promised one, it's the second year of the second 2,000 year period. So overall, it's the 4,000th year. And if it's been 2,000 years since then, we're in the 6,000 or so year. When's the Shabbat? The Shabbat is the 7th day. If you're looking for the Master to come back at any time he wants, you don't understand. He set up the calendar. He will not return until the time he has determined he will come. And everybody's going to see him. Make no mistake about that. Now, we're going to move over to our brother Yochanan, one of my favorite writers, because it's so direct and blunt. And Yochanan says something that correlates to what Moshe was to do here with the tabernacle. And it's why I read that particular set of verses there in Exodus 40. And it's going to be John 1, verse 14. So the Word became flesh and resided among us, and we had a view of his glory, a glory such as belongs to an only begotten Son from a Father, and he was full of undeserved kindness and truth. It's interesting. The Word became flesh and resided, or dwelt, or tabernacled among us. Moshe is being given the instructions in this parsha that chapter 40 is part of how to assemble the tabernacle. And if Yeshua is the tabernacle, the flesh, a man, a human being, that's what an Adam is. The Word became flesh does not mean that the physical part of Yeshua was Elohim, the Creator. But it's the tabernacle that the Creator comes down into to dwell, just like the pillar of fire and the cloud in the wilderness. The man Yeshua is the tabernacle. It's part of why no bones were to be broken. David understood these principles. That's one of the aspects he was referring to when the lamb, not a bone, is to be broken of the lamb. The tabernacle was supposed to be kept in the best condition. Upkeep was to be constant. When the tabernacle was moved, the priests were to go in and cover the Aron HaKodesh. The place where the testimony is. The Ark of the Covenant. The covenant represents the rules and the ways of the kingdom. They were also to cover up the menorah and the table of shewbread and the altar of incense. And then they were to call the Levites in, who were to carry these things. And Aharon is instructed, when we get to that point in the instructions in the Torah, that Eleazar, who's in charge of certain of those aspects, that they're not to call the Levites before they have everything covered, because even the Levites don't get to see the menorah and the Ark of the Covenant and the altar of incense and the table of shewbread. They only get to see the shape of it when it's covered up as they carry it around. We were supposed to see Yah when we looked at the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the wilderness. Just like we're supposed to see Yah when we think of Yeshua. Came down and tabernacled in a human being. That's why Yeshua didn't have a home. No place to lay his head. because that wasn't his job. Didn't mean that he didn't have any place to stay. But his mission was to be constantly on the move. That's why. So he had to go to his people because they'd lost their way. Predominantly those in the Galilee. And we look at Yachad, John chapter 3, verses 13 to 21. Moreover, no man has ascended into heaven, but he that descended from heaven, the Son of Man, or the Son of Adam. And just as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone believing in him may have everlasting life. For Elohim loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, in order that everyone exercising faith in him might not be destroyed, but have everlasting life. For Elohim sent forth his Son into the world, not for him to judge the world, but for the world to be saved through him. He that exercises faith in him is not to be judged. He that does not exercise faith has been judged already, because he has not exercised faith in the name of the only begotten Son of Elohim. Now this is the basis for judgment, that the light has come into the world, but men have loved the darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. For he that practices vile things hates the light, and does not come to the light, in order that his works may not be reproved. But he that does what is true comes to the light, in order that his works may be made manifest, as having been worked in harmony with Elohim. No man is ascended into heaven, only the Son. Yeshua hadn't died yet. This is John chapter 3. This is the conversation he's holding with Nicodemus. I wasn't sent here to destroy the world. I was sent here to save the world. But you know what? The world gets to choose whether it wants to be saved. That's the choice, the option. Do I want to be saved or not? It's not about, I'm going to save you whether you want to be or not. He doesn't do that. We're not robots. He didn't create beings who couldn't make choices. We're going to move on to Yachad chapter 14, verses 15 through 17. If you love me, you will observe my commandments, and I will request the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. The Spirit of the truth, which the world cannot receive, because it neither beholds it nor knows it. You know it, because it remains with you and is in you. I shall not leave you bereaved. I am coming to you. You have the truth. What is the truth? The truth is the Torah. We have to go to the Torah. He never promised to bring the Torah to us. He did that when he took us out of Egypt. He never said that he would do that again. But he's made the Word available to us all throughout the world. That's why we have the availability of different translations in the languages in the nations where we live. But simply reading that Word doesn't do a thing for us. If we don't act on it and do what it says because we believe what it says, then we have an empty, vain faith, because our faith isn't in Yah or in Yeshua. I will not leave you without any understanding, any knowledge. It's essentially what he's telling us here. I'm not leaving you here not knowing anything. I gave it to Moshe, and he imparted it to you, and you've had these generations who continued to pass it down to you. Are you in covenant? And if you are, what covenant are you in? Lots of people don't understand that a covenant is a contract. It's an agreement between two parties. And if one party breaks it, the other party's not obligated to keep it. We broke it. Y'all didn't. I know there are those who, well, how can a merciful God let these things happen? How can he not? He gave us a choice. Hey, our barbarity towards one another is not his fault, it's ours. And we have to own up to it. We, the human beings, are responsible for every act of cruelty committed against other human beings or the other creatures on this planet. And we will be judged for it. We can be forgiven, but that will not keep us from being judged. There's no such thing as the magic kingdom. I don't get to go wistfully up there because I said a little prayer, or I know his name, or I'm claiming I'm his people even though I don't live the way he said that he wanted me to live. He's merciful and graceful. He doesn't give us all the things we deserve, and we should be thankful. Going back to the beginning of John, nothing else in John will make sense, or will you be able to put in context if you don't keep these verses in context. John chapter 1, it's the opening of a writing. He's explaining to us how everything else is going to be perceived as he explains it. In the beginning, the Word was, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was a Elohim. In this translation, Elohim merely means authority. It's not saying there was another God. This one was in the beginning with Elohim. All things came into existence through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into existence. What has come into existence by means of him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light is shining in the darkness, but the darkness has not overpowered it. John 1 verse 3 tells us that Yeshua is the Creator. I've used this before to try to explain how to look at Yeshua. The Son is the builder, the Father is the architect, or the one that drew up the blueprints, the plans. The Son is the one that carries out that assignment. He's the Creator. Therefore, he's the one that gave the commandments to Moshe in the wilderness. He was the cloud and the pillar of fire. He was the strong right hand that took us out of Egypt. He's the power that divided the sea so that our forefathers could walk across on dry ground. If you love me, keep my command. Those who say, well, Yah's commandments are no longer enforced. Well, Yeshua is part of Yah. Yeshua means Yah is salvation. Yachad means unity. Even if you believe there is multiplicity of beings here, the word Yachad requires them to behave the same way, or to have the same common agenda or goal. I'm not a Trinitarian, but those who do believe in the Trinity, Yachad requires that if you believe that, then all three of those entities have to act in unity. They can't be against each other, or one of them becomes a Satan. Who is being lifted up, Yeshua or Satan? Satan means opponent. When Moshe was told to lift up those things in Exodus 40, verses 17 to 19 that I read earlier, it's a picture of Yeshua. The tabernacle being raised up, we should see Yeshua. We should see Yah, the Father. We should see all that. the tabernacle, the dwelling, where the pillar of fire, the cloud, would rest over. Why did it rest over the Holy of Holies? Because the Ark of the Covenant is the throne. And the presence was riding over the throne. If Yeshua is the Word, then when was that word spoken? In the beginning, he was with. And if we want to pin something on, as we can tie it to the human aspect of when Yah comes down and dwells in the human being, and Elohim proceeded to say, "Let light come to be." Then there came to be light. In the Hebrew, it's "be light." In the Hebrew, that's the only two words. It's "be light." What's the light? It's the truth. The promises of Yah that will be fulfilled. If you don't believe in the promises, then why do you even waste your time claiming you believe? You know, I've had people say, well, such and such and you are both believers. I go, I'm thinking in my mind, because I don't want to be mean. And people wouldn't understand that I'm with when this happens. But we don't both believe the same thing, because I know what they believe. It's not what I believe. I believe that the Scriptures are the Word given by men to us from Yah. So, given to us in terms that human beings understand. There are many witnesses. Each one is a different person. Each person could stand at some of the same events and record different things because somebody noticed one thing that somebody else didn't notice, because the way they were telling the story of what they witnessed, they didn't see that part, or that wasn't as important as the part they wanted you to see they saw. It doesn't mean that multiple witnesses at the same event, each writing their own rendition of what they witnessed, are telling us something different. But they're putting in factors and perspectives that only they had. And they want us to understand why they saw it that way. I've had people say, well, there's so much disunity in Scripture. Well, no, there's not. I'm not troubled, though, that certain events are described exactly the same way by two different people, especially if they didn't even live at the same time, because one of them was probably an eyewitness, and the other one is using accounts after the fact. Luke was not an eyewitness of Yeshua's ministry. Luke was a Goyim, a Gentile, not even circumcised. We find that out from Shaul himself in one of his letters. So there are certain things that Luke couldn't do. Luke couldn't eat the Pesach, the Passover lamb. Now, I believe Luke was probably one of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, returning to Torah. But Luke didn't live in the land. See, circumcision is about laying claim to the physical land inheritance. That's what Abraham was told. That if they want to live in the land that you have been given by me, your Creator, then all your male descendants and all your male servants must be circumcised, or they have no legal right to live in those lands. Let's go back to Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. And Yehovah Elohim proceeded to take the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden, to cultivate it and to take care of it. And Jehovah Elohim also laid this command upon man: from every tree of the garden you may eat to satisfaction. But as for the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat from it, for in the day you eat from it, you will positively die. Now this is where the aspect I was referring to earlier. A day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. People say, well, it tells us that Adam lived 930 years. But to Yah, Adam didn't live a day. A day is like 1,000 years. Adam did not live 1,000 years. So in Yah's eyes, Adam didn't even live a whole day. On the day you eat of it, you will die. Without a doubt. Adam didn't live to be 1,000 years old, so he died that day. Not that literal day in our mindset, as we think of in the 7 days make a week and 30 or so days make a month and such. But the 1,000-year day, Adam didn't make it to the end of the day. It'd be like having a baby and having them die the day they were born. He said you could eat of every tree except for one. Let's just take a little factor. Say that we were put in a grove of trees, all different kinds of fruits and everything. Say there's 100 of them. And the owner of this group of trees tells you, hey, you can stay here. You can work in this grove of trees, taking care of the fruit trees, picking the fruit, eating of it as you want. But there's one tree you can't eat from out of this 100. There's 99 you can eat from. But don't eat from this one tree or I'll have to throw you out. How much sense does it make that Adam and Chava, Eve, chose to eat that fruit? It didn't make any sense at all. Who knows how many trees were in that garden? Disobedience. I want what I want. That's our problem as human beings. I want him to bless me because he just has to. Because I called on his name or something. He's bound to bless me. He has to. He didn't have any choice. He stuck with me. Now let's move on to chapter 3. Verses 17 to 24. And to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife's voice and took to eating from the tree concerning which I gave you this command, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground on your account. In pain you will eat its produce all the days of your life, and thorns and thistles it will grow for you, and you must eat the vegetation of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. After this, Adam called his wife's name Eve, or Chava, because she had to become the mother of everyone living. And Jehovah Elohim proceeded to make long garments of skin for Adam and for his wife, and to clothe them. And Jehovah Elohim went to say, here the man has become like one of us in knowing good and bad. And now in order that he may not put his hand out and actually take fruit also from the tree of life and eat and live to time indefinite. With that Jehovah Elohim put him out of the Garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he had been taken. And so he drove the man out and posted at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubs and the flaming blade of a sword that was turning itself continually to guard the way to the tree of life. Not to keep people out, but to guard the way. We can't go to the tree of life in disobedience. That's why he had to throw Adam and Chava, Eve, out of the garden. I'm too merciful and gracious to let you live permanently in your sin. Oh, one day all our work will be through and we won't have to work anymore. That's a filthy lie. We were created to work. That's the curse, that we would have to work even harder and get less return because we decided, let's eat this fruit, even so Dad said, don't do it. Luke refers to the very first Adam as Ben Elohim, the son of Elohim, son of God. Why? Because he was the first one to be created, the first human being. Hey, we got all this other stuff to eat from. Hey, let's listen to this snake. Oh, honey, you're right. I'll go ahead and take that from you now and I'll eat it. What a brilliant move. Because you listen to your wife. He actually shows more mercy to Chava, Eve, than he does Adam. Because Adam's the covering. Eve was deceived by the snake. The snake never lied. He asked a question. And the lie was created in Chava's mind and condoned by Adam. Did Elohim say? The tree of life and how important it is to the story of man and the Creator and His plans for us, His hopes for us. Let's go back to the Revelation. I have told you the end from the beginning. Revelation 22, verses 1 and 2. And he showed me a river of water of life, clear as crystal, flowing out from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. Down the middle of its broad way, and on this side of the river and on that side, there were trees of life, producing 12 crops of fruit, yielding their fruits each month, and the leaves of the trees were for the curing of the nations. Wait a second here. If so many people think the new Jerusalem or the new Jerusalem is heaven, why are there still people needing these leaves to cure them? Some aspects of these leaves are for the healing of the nations. And it's producing a fruit every month. Why? Because the human beings still have to eat. And I'm going to take us to our brother Shaul here in just a few seconds and show that our brother Shaul does not say what most people have been taught that he says about immortality. Adam lost and Chava lost their immortality by eating the fruit they were told not to, and they were expelled from the garden because Yah said, I can't let you keep eating from the tree and live forever in your rebellion and sin. There is not a carte blanche. Oh, we don't have to keep His commandments. All we got to do is trust Him. Oh, keeping His commandments is how we trust Him. If my mother told me when I was young and growing up that there were cookies in the cookie jar and I'm not supposed to get in the cookie jar, or else I'm going to get in trouble. And I go get in the cookie jar and I don't get in trouble, guess what I would probably keep doing? Get in the cookie jar even if Mom told me not to, because Mom didn't do what she said she was going to do. And I'm saying Mom here because my father died when I was 8. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. My youngest siblings have no clue what their father was like. Unfortunately, my brother that I live with right now, who's only 2 years younger than me, says he can't hardly remember anything about Dad. And I sometimes feel a lot of pressure that I'm the only one who remembers anything about Dad. And my memory's not that much, because I don't have that much time to have those memories. And the memories I have, nobody else has. I'm the firstborn son of my mother. I was the one that broke the womb. My brother and I chose to, after he got, unfortunately he and his wife got divorced, he chose to come and we took care of our mother until the last couple of years of her life. She wasn't helpless, but she deserved her children to show her their honor and respect. that we could provide. Oh, we made mistakes. We didn't do things perfectly. Sometimes we were selfish. But for the most part, I hope that we showed her the honor that she deserved. Like I said, I know we didn't do it perfectly. I know we made mistakes. But I hope that in y'all's eyes, overall, I honored my mother. You know, I'm 57 years old now. My father died when he was 42. I've already lived 15 years longer than he did. My mother's side of the family has been blessed with pretty long lives. My mother was 89 when she died. My grandfather was 98. And my mother, even though for about a decade or maybe a little longer, had to battle with osteoporosis and diabetes, and 5-way bypass and a valve replacement all at one time. She was in her 70s when she had that. She still lived a decade or more after that. It was a blessing. How many out there would show your parent or parents that same dignity? I'm reminded of what I chose to do. My coworker I have whose own mother is battling breast cancer. And I know that family is very important to him. He's unfortunately gone through a divorce himself, and he's remarried, and he and his current wife both have gone through divorces. And I hope that this marriage is going to work for both of them. And I've never had the pleasure. I'd like to be a father. You know, Abraham was 100 years old. Yitzchak was born. He was 86 when Ishmael was born. So it's not out of the question. And I'm not asking for a miracle either. I believe that this always will. He'll be the right woman. And I've had some women say to me, well, it's all about you. I said, no, you don't understand. When I'm looking for the right woman, I've also asked Yah that the right woman for me, I'll be the right man for her. She deserves the same thing. And we're going to move into our brother Shaul. Life is meant to be lived. And we are given guidelines of how to live that life and what to expect if we'll at least put in the effort to try to live that life the way that our Creator designed us and has requested of us. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And I'm going to read this entire chapter. This is how important this chapter is. It's 58 verses. Now I make known to you, brothers, the good news, or the Besorah, which I declared to you, which you also received, in which you also stand, through which you are also being saved. Being saved. With the speech with which I declared the good news to you, if you are holding it fast, unless in fact you become believers to no purpose. Oh, believers to no purpose. What's our purpose? For I handed on to you among the first things that which I also received, that Mashiach died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried. Yes, that he has been raised up the third day according to the Scriptures, and then he appeared to Kepha, then to the 12. It says he was raised up. This is the human body that had to be raised back up by the Ruach. We are not alive if we do not have blood and do not breathe. That is the Torah definition of life. So this mystical existence does not happen. This is me. He gives me, Danny Palmer, life. You can tell that I'm alive Because I'm speaking, because to be speaking, I obviously must be breathing and have blood. Every creature that breathes and has blood has ruach in them. And there's a difference between us. Unfortunately, we human beings became arrogant and thought, well, because we're the top of the ladder, the rest of it, well, you know, we don't have to worry about taking care of it or nothing. But that was one of Adam's assignments early. You're to watch over and make sure that the rest of creation is okay too. Because they didn't get the intelligence and everything that I gave you. They have some intelligence. We don't know how much, but we know, we can tell by they learn things. Some creatures learn things more than others. Some creatures don't seem to learn anything at all. Some are stubborn. Oh, that's a personality. My brother once was given a Jack Russell Terrier, and we found out why it was given away. Of all the breeds of dogs I have ever encountered in my life, the Jack Russell is the most willful, self-absorbed breed I have ever encountered. I'm not saying there might not be another, but of the ones I've encountered, I don't want another Jack Russell Terrier anywhere around me. I don't hate them, I don't want to destroy them or anything, but you would tell her to sit and she'd stop and sit, but the minute she thought you weren't paying attention to her, oh, I can do whatever I want again now. It kind of reminds me of the way we behave as human beings. Okay. You must not be looking right now, so let's go ahead and do this. Even though we know we said not to. A whole planet full of Jack Russell Terriers. I don't think that's so funny. Because I hope I'm not like that. I know there are times when I do that. We all do. And we have to make it right with our Creator. And He's given us the methods to do that. After that, He appeared to upward of 500 brothers at one time, the most whom remain to the present, but some have fallen asleep in death. After that, He appeared to Yaakov. Now this is Yeshua's brother. Not either of the other two Yaakovs that were of the 12. Then to all the apostles. But last of all he appeared unto me, Shaul referring to himself, as if to one born prematurely. For I am the least of the apostles, and I am not fit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the congregation of Elohim. The congregation is not a church, it's not a synagogue. The congregation is the body of Israel, the population, the assembly, the Qahal, the Edut. But by Elohim's undeserved kindness I am what I am. And His undeserved kindness that was toward me did not prove to be in vain, but I labored in excess of them all. Yet not I, but the undeserved kindness of Elohim that is with me. However, whether it is I or they, so we are preaching, and so you have believed. Now if Mashiach is being preached, that He has been raised up from the dead, how is it some of you who among have said, there is no resurrection of the dead? Well, if Yeshua isn't resurrected from the dead, well, what have we got? What good news is there? If indeed there is no resurrection of the dead, neither has Mashiach been raised up. But if Mashiach has not been raised up, our preaching is certainly in vain, and our faith is in vain. Vain means worthless or empty. If Yeshua was not resurrected from the dead, then everything it says in what we call the Scriptures is a piece of crap. If He didn't do what was promised, if you believe in what some call the Brit Hadashah, and others the New Testament, that Yeshua did not die and was raised up, you've got no premise to have hope. He was a human being with the Ruach in Him. The human being died, paid the price for all the rest of us, was resurrected, raised up from the dead, And that's our hope. If the Father aspect of Yah did not tell the Son aspect to go back down and re-inhabit this human body and regenerate it. And I believe the reason that Yeshua, as he was out in the garden, was not recognized by anybody when they first saw him is because I think he looked like Adam did before Adam fell back in the garden. I think he was so perfect. The human part was so perfect again that Miriam and the other disciples who went to the tomb that day didn't recognize him because he didn't look anything like he did before. Moreover, we are also found to be false witnesses of Elohim because we have borne witness against Elohim that he raised up the Mashiach, but whom he did not raise up if the dead are not really to be raised up. They're saying, Shaul's saying here, if we're preaching that Messiah was raised up and Elohim didn't raise him up, then we're liars. For if the dead are not to be raised up, neither has Mashiach been raised up. Further, if Mashiach has not been raised up, your faith is useless, and you are yet in your sins. In fact, also those who fell asleep in death in union with Mashiach perished. If you don't believe that we're going to be resurrected because Yeshua was resurrected, literally brought back to life in a human body, then everybody that we've laid in the grave is gone forever. There's no immortality of the soul. That's a Gnostic concept. If in this life only we have hoped in Mashiach, we are of all men most to be pitied. If all we believe is that we have to believe in Messiah, and he wasn't resurrected, and he didn't come back in a literal human body, glorified, perfected, made the way I believe that the human being was originally created, then people should pity us. Then the atheists are right. If Yeshua wasn't resurrected, then the atheists are right. However, now Mashiach has been raised up from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep in death. For since death is through a man, resurrection of the dead is also through a man. Since the man brought death into the world by eating of the fruit, a man had to be the instrument of resurrection. A man had to be resurrected, an Adam. For just as in Adam all are dying, so also in the Mashiach all will be made alive. We're going to be resurrected. That's what it means. We're going to be made alive. But each one in his own rank. Mashiach, the first fruits. Afterwards, those who belong to the Mashiach during his presence. Next, the end, when he hands over the kingdom to his Elohim and Father, whom he has brought to nothing, all government and all authority and power. For he must rule as king until Elohim has put all enemies under his feet. Oh, when he comes back as king, the kingdom is not going to be perfect yet. Yeshua will reign as king until all Yah, the Father's enemies, are put under Yeshua's feet. That's why Yeshua said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. As the last enemy, death is to be brought to nothing. For Elohim subjected all things under his feet. But when he says that all things have been subjected, it is evident that it is with the expectation of the one who subjected all things to him. But when all things will have been subjected to him, then the Son himself will also subject himself to the one who subjected all things to him, that Elohim may be all things to everyone. That when the Son has completely brought creation back into order, he's going to hand it back over to the Father. Oh, how many of you ever heard that? Boy, once again, that's a thorn in the side, isn't it? Well, all I got to do is believe in Jesus. Well, if he's going to have to hand over authority to his Father after it's made into subjection to him, the one that so many claim, well, we don't have to keep his commandments, is going to be in charge for eternity. The Son's going to say, hey, Dad, here's everything back. You think the Son would want to hand back to the Father chaos, rebellion? No. Otherwise, what will they do who are being baptized for the purpose of being dead ones? If the dead are not to be raised up at all, why are they being also baptized for the purpose of being such? Why are we also in peril every hour? Daily I face death. This I affirm by the exaltation over you, brothers, which I have in Mashiach Yeshua, our Master. If like men I have fought with wild beasts at Ephesus, of what good is it to me? If the dead are not to be raised up, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we are to die. If you don't believe in the resurrection, you might as well just go out there and party and live your life any way you want. Because there isn't a future. That's what Shaul was saying here. If you don't believe in the resurrection, there is no future. There's no other promise made. Do not be misled. Bad associations spoil useful habits. Wake up to soberness in a righteous way, and do not practice sin, for some are without knowledge of Elohim. I am speaking to move you to shame. Nevertheless, someone will say, how are the dead to be raised up? Yes, with what sort of body are they coming? You unreasonable person, what you sow is not made alive unless first it dies. And as for what you sow, not the body that will develop, but a bare grain. It may be of wheat or of any of the rest. But Elohim gives it a body, just as it has pleased him, and to each of the seeds its own body. This is the very same principle that Yeshua uses about the seed. We plant the seed in the ground, it grows up a crop. That's the same. But it's not exactly the same. It's actually better. Not all flesh is the same flesh, but there is one of mankind, and there is another flesh of cattle, and of other flesh of birds, and another of fish. And there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly bodies is one sort, and that of the earthly bodies is a different sort. The glory of the sun is one sort, and the glory of the moon is another, and the glory of the stars is another. In fact, star differs from star in glory. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. It is raised up in incorruption. The same body is sown corrupt. It is raised incorrupt. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised up in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised up in power. It is sown a physical body. It is raised up a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual one. Oh, he's saying there's not one without the other. It is even so written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. Nevertheless, the first is not that which is spiritual, but that which is physical. Afterwards, that which is spiritual. Excuse me there. The first man is out of the earth and made of dust. The second man is out of heaven. As the one made of dust is, so those made of dust are also. And as the heavenly one is so, those who are heavenly are also. And just as we have borne the image of the one made of dust, we shall bear also the image of the heavenly one. We shall also bear the image. Adam, after his sin, raised up sons in his image. That's not talking about the body. It's talking about his sons raised up doing the same wrong things he did. Making the same wrong choices. Because why? Like father, like son. Oh, if the Father gave us the commandments, which so many think, and Yeshua is his son, What does Yeshua do? However, this I say, brothers, that flesh and blood cannot inherit Elohim's kingdom, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. Look, I tell you a sacred secret. We shall not all fall asleep in death, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, during the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised up incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Oh, it says, until the last trumpet, the dead won't be raised. Where are all the dead people now? Oh, my mother and my father and my grandparents and aunts and uncles and so my cousins and other people I've known in my life, they're still in a grave in a cemetery somewhere. Or if unfortunately they died, drowned in the ocean or whatever, and sunk to the bottom of the sea, whatever, that's where they're at. For this which is corruptible must put on incorruption, and this which is mortal must put on immortality. Which is mortal must put on immortality. This which is corrupt must put on incorruption. In this verse, the Greek word is rooted in the word enduo, meaning to put on, to clothe, to array, sinking into a garment. That means we have to put it on. If I have to put on immortality, this body, in its resurrected state, must put on immortality like putting on a pair of clothes. I have to put it on. But when this is corruptible, puts on incorruption, and this which is mortal puts on immortality, then the saying will take place which is written, death is swallowed up forever. Until we put on immortality, death still has power. Death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? The sting producing death is sin, but the power for sin is the law. But thanks to Elohim, for he gives us the victory through our Master, Yeshua HaMashiach. Consequently, my beloved brothers, become steadfast, unmovable, always having plenty to do in the work of the Master, knowing that your labor is not in vain in connection with the Master. Sin brings death. Why do people still die? Because the wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal. We don't get eternal life until the resurrection. And we must put it on at that time. Shaul tells us we do not become immortal, but we put on or clothe ourselves with immortality. Access to the tree of life is given to the doers of Yah's will. Oh, they broke Yah's will is how we got thrown out of the garden. We want to get back in. We got to do exactly the opposite. Repent. Turn around. Prayer does not give us immortality, but actions by trusting that Yah will keep his word. Any other thought line or teaching is contrary to this instructing us to trust in another king and kingdom. If I say that I don't have to obey, and I can sin the same way that the first human being did, and I expect to be in the kingdom and have all the benefits, I'm actually looking for another king or another kingdom. In the Revelation it said there that the nations would bring their gifts into the New Jerusalem. The word nations there is also the same word that is translated Gentile. There are no Gentiles living in the New Jerusalem. Gentiles live outside the city. They're still there. They're still alive. But the nations means they're not his people. He came so that all could become part of his kingdom. But you can't be a Gentile and be in the olive tree. It's not allowed. The covenant is with the house of Israel and the house of Yehuda and all those who join. But the house of Judah and the house of Israel have to obey too. And those who come in with us and join. The promise in Yeshayahu, Isaiah, is that there would be no end of Yeshua's government. That it would increase. Not that it would get more rules, but his kingdom would reach more people. The New Jerusalem, what is a city? A city's not buildings. A city is people. There's no Jerusalem, no New Jerusalem, without people. How do we walk? How do we conduct ourselves? Do we have the same testimony as Yeshua, which was the testimony that was placed in the ark? He said the time will come that there'll be better promises. Not that there would be a different covenant. I'm going to give you more. It's almost like an enticement. I don't want to go all out and say that, but it's kind of like, well, come on. I've even made it better. Same rules, but you can expect even more than you could before. And as always, may Yah keep his face upon you. May he look upon you grace. And may he give you shalom. Until next time, shalom aleichem.
May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May the light of his countenance shine upon you, and may he be gracious to you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.